Welcome to another episode of Pop Occulture, where we discuss the crossroads of popular culture, the occult, and media. I'm Lilith Dorsey, MFA, voodoo priestess, author, scholar, choreographer, and...
I'm Jason Winslade PhD in performance studies, media studies, and religious studies, and I'm also a performing artist. This week in the program, we are going to discuss the recent Lovecraft Country season on HBO Max, and it just recently concluded. We're going to look at this broader context of Lovecraftian themes as well as the genre tropes of magic and occultism that the show plays with and challenges.
And we're going to talk about the themes of race and generational trauma on the show that many others have already talked about, but we're going to address going to those specifically in the context of the practice of magic, African traditional religions.
And we're going to talk about, it just as a warning to our viewers, this will be a fully spoiler-full episode.
Alert.
So if you haven't seen this amazing show, go back and watch all 10 episodes before you hear us talk about all of the twists and turns in it.
And just to remind everybody, there's so much to talk about with Lovecraft Country that we're going to do this in two parts to sort of break it up and give people more time to sort of digest all the wonderful and intense and fascinating things that are going on here.
Right. So the first episode, we're going to talk mostly about the setup and the content and some of the aspects of the way that the show plays with the Lovecraftian themes and tropes. And then the second episode, we're going to talk about the payoff and what are the broader implications of this.
Yay!
Okay, so first off,
yes.
Yeah. Let's just say that this the show Lovecraft Country is utterly groundbreaking, and it's unlike anything that most of us have seen before, and it's just an incredible show. Every week I was watching and standing up half the time and going whoa, and really having intense empathy and emotional reactions to it, and it really does something different in terms of how it approaches the occult and magic and history.
Yeah, for me, I think that's really important how it presents this. We were talking about it being racialized magic, but also a history, sort of a hidden history that I think a lot of people have really not gotten. And some people have only gotten on a deep visceral level because it's part of their generational past. And it's especially relevant today. And this is something that I think they really capitalized on by bringing this. What is reality? What is illusion? What is truth? Bringing that to the fore, as my dear friends from film school used to say, and sticking it in your face and making you really deal with it. And that's something I really value and respect, because for me, that's how my art and my magic is, in your face.
So, it's really appropriate that, I'm here with Lilith in New Orleans the weekend before Halloween recording this. And I'm, my home base is Chicago, where a lot of the show takes place. And, we're sort of coming together, obviously, from two very different backgrounds and viewing experiences. And, so we're going to have obviously different perspectives on it. But, not just our background, but our personal practices as well. And so there'll be some interesting contrasts that come up with this, I'm sure.
That's what we're calling it, interesting?
Yes.
Okay.
A poignant, salient, whatever we want to call it.
Okay.
So first of all, let's talk about Lovecraft. H.P. Lovecraft, who he is or who he was, and what he means to the sort of overall general occult world. One of the things that I think a lot of people who may not know a lot about Lovecraft may not realize is that Lovecraft and the Lovecraftian mythos that he wrote, and created and defined in his stories in the in the 20s and 30s, really is in the DNA of almost any fantasy, sci-fi, horror genre piece that you can think of in the last 50 years. You know, everything from the Twilight Zone to you know, to Buffy, to the Evil Dead, to just pretty much any kind of story that focuses on the otherworldly, the demonic, the mysterious, the magical. So much of it owes a direct debt to Lovecraft. I mean, we could go on and on about all the different specific influences that the Lovecraftian mythos has. And you know, one of the things that is prominent about this, when I look at, I mean, just personally, how I encountered Lovecraft first was as a you know, 12-year-old, 13-year-old, and I used to subscribe to Twilight Zone magazine because I was a huge nerd.
Was?
And yes, well, and yeah, so I you know, loved Twilight Zone magazine at the time. If anyone from back in the 80s remembers this, you know, not only did it focus on the show itself, but it featured short stories and a lot of what is called, you know, the genre of weird fiction, which retroactively was applied to Lovecraft in terms of, you know, him sort of starting this this genre. And you know, I was exposed to a lot of stories from that time period, especially stuff by Arthur Machen and you know, Robert Bloch and all these people. And even at that point in the magazine, they were premiering new stories by Ray Bradbury and Stephen King and all of this stuff. So I was really exposed to this early on as a template for, you know, weird fiction and stories. And it wasn't until, obviously, you know, I got into as a, you know, personal interest and a practitioner in my 20s, in the 90s, that I started to realize the influence of Lovecraft on all of the things that I was studying. And so it's important to note that Lovecraft himself was an atheist. He was a skeptic. He didn't believe in magic as such, but yet his work informed everybody from Aleister Crowley to Anton LaVey to you know, chaos magic and all of that stuff, to the point where, you know, in the 80s there was you know, the popular Call of Cthulhu role-playing game that rivaled D&D for you know, and what's strange about all that stuff is that, you know, it was never about winning the magical quest. It was about surviving with your insanity intact, if you could even do that. It was not a happy mythos
like
or game, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, you can look at all of the ways that Lovecraft specifically influenced these writers and practitioners. And there's a great piece that you know, we had talked about this just recently. We did a workshop for Chicago Pagan Pride about generational trauma and magic and Lovecraft Country. And there's a great piece by Eric Davis, one of our favorite
I love Eric Davis.
One of our favorite authors about pop culture and occultism, about the Lovecraftian mythos, that was published in the sort of notorious Gnosis magazine in the 90s, that goes over a lot of this stuff. And what's interesting about that is, at the time, again, you know, in the 90s, you know, this was established as, okay, yeah, there's all this connection to the occult, but there was this almost like a footnote of like, oh yeah, he also was kind of a giant crazy racist, but usually that part is, you know, was subsumed and downplayed in the discussions around Lovecraft. So
for a long time.
Right.
Yes.
And so it was only, you know, a few years ago that people started to say, hey, wait a second, maybe we shouldn't be celebrating this guy, and maybe we should take him off of the World Fantasy Award. You know, based on Jose Older's BuzzFeed article,
right.
Was 100 years of what is it?
What is it?
Yeah, 100 years of weird fear on H.P. Lovecraft's literature of genealogical terror, which was Daniel Jose Older's BuzzFeed article that started this conversation. Well, it didn't start it, but it reignited this conversation on Lovecraft and racism. And then, you know, a couple of years later, the Daniel Ruff Lovecraft Country novel was published. So what do we make of this? The idea that on the one hand we've got this elaborate mythos that is carried over into all these different short stories. There was a collectivism to it where Lovecraft encouraged his friends and fans to write in the mythos. So there was already a participatory thing. You had Robert E. Howard, who was the Conan creator, writing in it. You had Robert Bloch in his earliest career, the guy who wrote the novel that Psycho is based on. You had a whole bunch of people writing in the mythos. And you had Lovecraft creating the Necronomicon. And those of you who are familiar with left-hand path stuff, Necronomicon is a huge part of, it's one of those fictional texts that start off as, as this meta, text that then becomes a real thing. So like the history of occultism, whether it's the Golden Dawn or the Rosicrucians, there's this sort of apocryphal text that someone somewhere makes up that becomes real because practitioners start following it and taking it on, taking on faith as a real thing, even though there's a bit of a sleight of hand there.
I mean, I think what really struck me is I didn't really come to Lovecraft until later. And for those of you who know me well, I'm not even sure you know this, but I lived in New England for a really long time, and I lived just outside of Providence. And that literally is Lovecraft Country. So for me, a lot of what the work deals with, I guess this is my perspective as somebody who lived there for a long time, and I have family that's from there. I have, way back generations that were there in the beginning, that a lot of my friends used to joke when I was there. I was on the Interfaith Council there, and we used to sit down every week and go, the name of the state is Rhode Island and Providence Plantations. So they would say to us, welcome to the plantation. So there was this internalized, and we're talking about New England, which is, again, you don't think about, oh, well, the slaves were free, so it wasn't racialized in the same way, but it was, and it still is today. I mean, there's petitions out there to remove this name and to get rid of it after all these, 2020 now, after all these years. So it's this kind of internalized energy of racism and elitism and all of these things that kind of play out in different ways in the show, which we'll get into more later, but that this is the mindset. This is the world of monsters, and monsters of all colors, and monsters of all socioeconomic backgrounds. And there's definitely a hierarchy there. And this is a framework within which we have to figure it out in order to be able to exist, especially as people of color, especially as people, on the lower socioeconomic scale. So that's where I came to it from. And it was something that I just sort of was like, everybody knew, but nobody talked about. And I think that this is something sort of kind of how they explain it in the show. Yes, it's the meta text that's always there, but are we really talking about it, or are we just seeing it poking at us from the woods, like some of the beasties and the monsters and stuff like that are out there?
Yeah, and just to emphasize again, I was unaware of the racial aspects of Lovecraft's writing until really just recently, and it's important to note that one of the aspects of that is Lovecraft's fear of the not just the unknown, but the monstrous. A lot of that comes down to his fear of miscegenation. Sure. and mixing the races. So that's a vital aspect of that racism in there. And also just the fact that with Lovecraft, it's not there's a great line in Eric Davis's piece about how it's not the sleep of reason that is to be feared in the mythos of Lovecraft. It's reason with its eyes agog. So that,
I like that.
Yeah. So that the idea is it's not ignorance that you should fear, but rather it's knowledge, and that the more you know, the more insane you're gonna get, and that there isn't any kind of comfort and safety in knowing more. And in fact, it is, not only is ignorance bliss, but ignorance is sanity, is safety. And so part of what happens in that first episode is that, leaving that safety of Chicago, which was not a safe place at that time at all, but yet there was that sense of community and leaving that place and going to the sundown towns and going to the places where if you were on the wrong side of the border you could be killed. So going into Lovecraft Country is obviously this allegory for, or this metaphor for going into the unknown where you are no longer safe.
That's right.
And then you find out that
the rules are different. Right. Everything is different.
and that the actual monsters make more sense than the racists, right?
Yes, definitely. And we keep getting reminded there's no situation that can't be made worse with the police. So yes. We have all of these things over and over again. That to me is really the beauty of the show too. And that whole scene for me, you're talking about knowledge and this whole sort of foregrounding of Adam and Eve and the serpent and yes. the apple and what are we eating and what are we, that's not just miscegenation, but also misogyny. There's right. all of this. Okay. And so that's why we get so much of it, sort of directed at Letitia fucking Lewis in a way.
You're going to say it a lot, so.
I'm just going to keep saying it. But
F-bombs beware.
Yeah. But because she in some way embodies all these things. She's got, whatever, aggro. She's problematic for almost everybody in the story, but she's also in some ways emblematic of everyone in the story. Mm-hmm. She has the same struggles as a woman. She has the same struggles as a Black person, but then she's a light-skinned woman. There's just so much going on here with this character that I just think it's beautiful. I think it's really masterful. And I think that Jane Small does an amazing job of the whole thing.
And we're going to get into a lot of the details about the character in a bit. And I think that just as a way into the show, we have this legacy of Lovecraft as an occult source, but also the legacy of Lovecraft's racism. And I think from the very beginning, the show establishes that this is a problematic text that we are going to comment on. And so there's this early scene, the first few minutes of the first episode, where Tick is the main character, Atticus Freeman, is discussing with a stranger on the bus, a Black woman that he's on the bus alone with, what it's like to read John Carter of Mars, where the hero is an ex-Confederate soldier. So there's this brief scene we're going to show here in just a second.
You said the hero was a Confederate officer.
Ex-Confederate.
He fought for slavery. You don't get to put an X in front of that.
Stories are like people. Love them doesn't make them perfect. You just try and cherish them, overlook their flaws.
Yeah, but the flaws are still there.
Yeah, they are. But I love Pope stories.
That brief scene establishes how, okay, what do we do with this as a problematic text, and also, what we means, and we, which does not include me. What do Black readers of genre, Black audiences of genre do with these problematic texts? Yes, well, right. So I mean that sort of launches the show. This notion of we're gonna take this idea of and this is something that goes back to critical race theory of the master's tools, and that means not just the sources of literature, but the sources of magic.
Sure.
And that's what the show deals with on a meta level, and it's what it deals with on a plot level as well.
Well, I think it just reimagines time in a different way. That in a sort of, and again, this is something we're going to go on to talk about in this episode, the next episode, but there's more of a Afrofuturistic concept of time, as in the seeds of Beyonce, the seeds of Rihanna, the seeds of all of this, bitch better have my money. The seeds of all of this are born in the beginnings of these things that we see happening in the Tulsa massacre, in the murder of Emmett Till, as you said, in all of these things that when my daughter was watching it, she said to me, does every episode have a specific sort of reminder about this was the huge thing that was happening in African history that may have been left out of the history books, because despite the fact that she had, an Ivy League and also a public school education in New York City, she'd never heard about Emmett Till, and I think that especially as a person of color, that it's hard for us to talk about these things, even to our own children, even within our own families. And one of the most poignant things to me about that particular scene was I visited the Smithsonian Museum of African American, and they have a whole Emmett Till exhibit, which is actually photographs, because they took photographs of the body after what happened to him and all of those horrors. And they're laid out in a coffin, just like in the viewing was at the time. And his mother wanted an open coffin. But what was fascinating to me was, as hard as it was to get on that line, there were so many people that couldn't do it. There were so many people that knew about the history, and it was just a few feet in front of them, but they still couldn't process what had happened, to take those extra steps and bear witness literally to the murder of Emmett Till. And that was just so powerful. And I think to bring it back here is also something that they've allowed the show to be a vehicle for education on a deep and emotional level. No, it's not a documentary, but because it's a drama, I think that allows us to feel and process it in a different way.
Right. And this itself, what we're talking about in terms of the artistic photo reconstruction of Emmett Till in the museum, and this construction of media is magic. That's a certain kind of magic, whether you call it chaos magic or pop culture magic or whatever it is. It's the idea of reconstructing the body through photographs. It's performative magic, and not performative in the sense of fake, but performative in the sense of creating a performance out of this material. And so you've got, and again, the whole thing about Afrofuturism, right? And that goes along with a lot of what people like Alan Moore does as well, the idea that all time is happening at once. And so I was going back to Naomi Wadler's March for Our Lives speech from 2018, and then also Gil Scott-Heron's Whitey on the Moon, and of course the famous William F. Buckley debate with James Baldwin, where James Baldwin has that amazing speech.
Sonia Sanchez, Fire. Right. Oh my gosh.
Oh yeah. I mean, so many elements, and it is.
Zaki Shange, I have to say that was moving. I was crying during that For Color Girls piece, because she always makes me cry. Again, so powerful.
And the idea of putting these I think there's a certain amount, we're used to a certain amount of anachronism when it comes to putting maybe contemporary music over a past scene. So it's not quite so new to put Rihanna or Cardi B over a past scene, but the idea of not just music, but speech, giving voice to not just the ancestors, but the descendants, right?
Sure.
And that it's all happening it's all part of a narrative thread. And this, to me, is very much a chaos magic thing, right? The idea that we're going to take from all these different fabrics and create this quilt of time and trauma and magic.
Right.
Yeah. Let's see. So one of the things that we want to go into now is just how does the show define magic? And there are a lot of ways into this, and there are certainly when part of our research and experience of watching the show, it was to listen to the Lovecraft Country podcasts that were put out for each episode that included contemporary critics and one of the show writers and things like that, and their discussions. And I highly recommend listening to those, because those are fantastic discussions and they get into a lot of stuff. But I mean, they're approaching it obviously from a genre standpoint, and the fact that they are horror fans, and Misha Green, the showrunner, is very much steeped in horror, and the fact that these writers were very influenced by Buffy. They name drop Buffy all the time, which is great. I mean, the idea that there's this crossover, and the fact that again, the Whedonverse is kind of built on Lovecraft to a certain degree as well.
Sure.
But yeah, the idea that they're approaching it from a genre standpoint, so they're going to look at, okay, what is the genre background of white secret societies, white magical societies, and what is this sort of broad contrast between witchcraft and African traditional religions and things like that. What do they get right? What do they get wrong about that?
Yeah, I think too, there's this whole influence of, not to take anything away from Misha Green, but to me, it also really speaks to the messages that are put out there by Jordan Peele, who's an executive producer on the project. You know what I mean? I think that there's a way in which some of how back to the master's tools again, some ways in which he uses the master's tools to sort of take down the master, beat the master in his face. We can see this in Get Out. We can see it in Us. We can see it in all these different ways that he does it. And this kind of does it in a different way. For me, it does it in a more female way.
Right.
It does it in a blacker way, almost to some extent, because what's represented here really is the narrative has shifted. Again, we're not watching a bunch of white people on television anymore. Yeah. We're watching a bunch of Black people, and it's their story, and it's written by people who have experienced these things to some extent, which makes a very different end result. And that's something I think that as a filmmaker, somebody who walked, I think when I went to NYU, I was the only Black woman in the class of, I think, what was it? Probably about 350, 400 people in my freshman class. I was the only Black woman there. It was right after Spike Lee had graduated. So for me, it was, here's the whatever crop of filmmakers coming out, and none of them are Black people. Almost, even tiny fraction of it was women, and those were, white women. So for me to see people like Misha Green out there and see people like being able to tell their story, and even the woman who's on the podcast, what's her name? I'm sorry, I forgot her name. But anyway. We'll put it in later in a second, and I apologize to her for forgetting her name. But knowing that there's another Black woman out there who is
Shannon Houston.
Shannon Houston. Okay. There we go. So, but to see her voice, to see these voices out here, this is unprecedented. Right. This is really something that we have not seen before, ever. So I'm just really happy about that.
Yeah, I mean, Misha Green says that's part of her project to sort of centralize Black stories within the genre that is, usually white, Eurocentric. So there's, there are some things that, we're used to a certain amount of secret society elements from occult stories, and we're going to show this. We'll put a brief clip here that establishes what the Order of the Ancient Dawn is, and the Sons of Adam, and the idea that they are a legacy-based secret society that I think they make a note that they distinguish themselves from the KKK because they're not poor people, right? Right. And so there's a clear bit in one of the main aspects of this plot is that Tick is the sole remaining descendant that came obviously from the
kindness,
right, the tradition of,
this is my face,
yes, that the main high guru magician impregnated,
had sex with his slave.
Yes. Right.
Raped.
And that he is the descendant of all this, and so this is what this scene shows right now, and it also highlights some of the ways in which Black occultism was a thing at the time, but not talked about a lot.
Now I got some experience with fraternal societies, being a part of Prince Hall Freemasons myself. Anybody know who Prince Hall was? He was an abolitionist who joined the Massachusetts militia to fight for independence. And he wanted to join the local Freemasons, but Tick, remind me why he wasn't allowed in.
Because he was a colored man.
So yeah, so one of the things about this Order of the Ancient Dawn, of course, that even though historically it's not that similar at all, but it still evokes the notion of the Golden Dawn.
Even the name, I feel like.
Right. But the whole thing about the Sons of Adam, one of the things that the leader of this group establishes is that they are using this Garden of Eden story to quite literally create this narrative of mastery. That that Adam, the first son, is the master of all the beasts of the field, and and the implication is other races. And so you have this sense that, and Christina, which there's a lot to talk about with Christina, we'll talk about later. She mentions later in the show that her father and this group saw magic as she says, like money and politics, a method for exerting their will over the world. And she contrasts her goal as not as exerting her will, but rather to experience the world. And there's some really interesting and problematic aspects of that when we look at her character in terms of appropriation and privilege and all that.
I wanted to say that, this is why I'm looking on my phone, because I couldn't remember Tony Goldwyn's name, but those of you who are out there, all my black friends that watch Scandal, you know, him being in there to have, you know, immediately he walks on, you're like, oh my gosh, it's President Fitzgerald Grant. Like, so we're already carrying this, not a Scandal fan, but we're already carrying this narrative of somebody who's in a position of power, who's somebody who's in a position of whiteness, somebody who's already crossed the boundary into, you know, what did we used to call it back in the 80s? Jungle fever. You know what I mean? There's that he's crossed that line. We know what he's doing. And I find it so ironic that he's the representative of the head of this thing today. He's somebody. So for all of us, we're watching this and we're like, okay, here's somebody who's almost the pinnacle of whiteness, the pinnacle of power, the pinnacle of this kind of domination, you know, power distribution, uneven kind of weird sex thing going on. So I just wanted to say that because I think that that's something that a lot of us were thinking when we saw him, because he means that even before he opens his mouth, and then the text and the narrative support that in so many different ways.
Yeah, so it establishes early on in those first couple of episodes that not only is there the seat of power out there, but there is this book of names, and naming, of course, is a huge thing in the series. And that is in contrast to, you know, Lovecraft's, you know, Necronomicon was the Book of the Dead, and this is the Book of Names. But there's a seat of power out there that is reliant on, well, the operations that come from that seat of power that have to do with immortality rely on the subjugation and absorption of black bodies, right? That tick is, you know, is set up to be the sacrifice from the very beginning, and that gets carried through the entire show. And so that's one of those themes that's okay. Well, if Tick's going to be the sacrifice, then the goal for the Freeman family and extended family is to literally flip that script. And
Sure.
And there's a question that's placed early on, and again, it goes back to that notion, you know, can the master's tools dismantle the master's house? And in critical race theory, usually the answer is no. But in this, you know, that question is left open. And so
because I think Tick has an advantage. I mean, Tick has an advantage because he's part of that. He's internalized that. You know, in episode 9, he says, teach me how to cast a spell. It's my birthright.
Right.
So this is that he possesses this ancestral knowledge from Hannah, but he also possesses the ancestral knowledge from the white line. So he's like the best of both worlds, almost meeting in the middle, which allows him to be the sacrifice, which, you know, for us was always to make sacred, to make sacred through giving something up, but it's still about an elevation. And I think that's what we see as it goes on, that there's so many ways that all the characters are really giving themselves up and giving up more and more bits of themselves, their heart, their soul, their minds, all of their blood, literally, all of this for the higher good, for the communal good. And that's really what the message keeps coming back to. But I think we have enough time to touch on one more tiny point, because we said we were going to do this in 2 halves.
Yeah,
so what's it going to be?
Well, I think it's important just to sort of continue what we were saying. I think it's important to note that a lot of to viewers, a lot of what we get, you know, in order to understand what the rules of magic are, comes from Christina, who basically, you know, white-splains, magic-splains to all the characters. You know, you know, it's not, you can't just use words. It's, you know, it's incantations on their own do not do it. You need a body. You need an intention, and in some cases, you literally need a piece of the body to enact the spell. And so,
it has to be a black body, you know. I love that line of hers. You can't just go around killing white women, you know.
Well, I mean, and again, that's how the Freemans flip the script, is because they literally use a piece of the colonizer's body to cast the spell later on. So a lot of what we have in the trajectory of the show are the Freemans, you know, learning from what Christina is telling them, but also deciding to recontextualize it and reframe it for the purposes of community, of protection, family, and going beyond what her very solipsistic goal is. And I think that's a lot of what we're going to talk about in the next episode.
So join us, tune into our YouTube channel, like, subscribe, comment. We're so happy that everybody's supporting us and everything that everybody's done for us so far. We also have some donation links that we're going to put at the end, and we would really appreciate that. I don't know, is there anything else we need to say?
As we like to do, we're going to put some links to some sources in the comments, but also, if you have, comments, suggestions for future shows, and, any kind of feedback, and we'd love to see you join us next week.
Thank you.